Hi everyone, it's Nicole here for Hero Arts, My Monthly Hero, with some card samples featuring the December 2018 My Monthly Hero main kit, and I've also included a couple of add-ons, but this video mostly focuses on the main kit. It is probably one of my very favorite kits from Hero Arts ever, tied with my first placed one. I just absolutely love it. I used, I think, almost every image from the main kit with my 3 cards today, and I'm really excited to share my cards with you. I'm starting with my Misty, and I have placed the add-on background stamp. This is the Starlight Star Bright, and I removed the foam insert from my Misty, and I'm inking up my background stamp with some Distress Oxide inks. This is a combination of Mermaid Lagoon, Blueprint Sketch, and Black Soot. Now the thing about this is a huge, fairly solid background image, which can be a little tricky to stamp. Inks with pigment in them are definitely going to be a little bit easier. Using a stamp positioner also helps. And in this case, I am using a mini mister to get a soft, even mist of water all over my background. And I'm inking it up a couple times at least, re-misting my background stamp and pressing it into place. By using a stamp positioner, I'm able to stamp in the same place more than once. All 3 of my card shares today are going to feature this exact same technique, just using different images. This first one is by far the most detailed. It's a very, very full scene using multiple fairies, multiple dandelion images, the toadstool, ladybugs, all of the things, and then a sentiment at the top. While it does feature tons of images from the main kit, there's still a fair amount of open white, I kind of quote unquote white space up near the top. I went with darker colors to kind of make it look like a night sky. There is a moon in here this time, and of course all the beautiful stars there that then didn't stamp. I am drying my background a little bit in between stamping the background. And that's going to help. I don't want to oversaturate the paper. If I do, I won't get a very good stamped background. So I just kind of rubbed my ink color all over my stamp, layering those colors in because I did want a multicolored background. You can still see there's some faint areas in my background. That's why I'm stamping or inking it up rather one last time here. Spritzing with water from a distress, or not from a distress sprayer, I'm so sorry, a mini mister. It's going to have a much more even application of water. Then pressing that down, and that looks awesome. So I am going to, I think I did stamp maybe one more. I see that little light spot and it kind of was bothering me. I will press that down, and I'm going to let this completely air dry before I go and take a sentiment from the main kit and stamp that with Versamark ink along the tops of the top edge of the card. And then I will heat emboss with white embossing powder. That's going to tie in really nicely with the moon and the stars. And that moon is going to kind of help frame up the word fairy over there on the left side. So I'll show you that here in a second. When working with water and also working with stamping multiple layers, it's super important to dry in between, adding each different layer to the background, because otherwise you will oversaturate, and especially those star images, the moon too for that matter, but they will bleed and you're not going to get that crisp background image that you're looking for. So that is how that first background was achieved. It did take a little bit of effort, especially for the first one, but I think it was well worth it. Here is a look at the images I'm using for my card. In addition to what you see here, I did stamp leaves multiple times to use on my image, and I kind of added those last minute as I started working on building up the scene. I wasn't exactly sure what all I needed until I got to that point. Adding in some color skin tones, to make it easy, I went with blonde hair for all of my fairies, which kind of ironically, I guess, are the same colors that I'm using for my dandelions and for my parts of the toadstool. It really helps tie everything together and makes these fairies look like they're in a fairy garden. I absolutely love that about this. So those are YR 30, 31, and 24. Some blue violets for the wings. To make the wings even more special, once we have die cut them, we are going to take Nouveau Crystal Drops in White Blizzard and add a layer of sparkle. I also opted to not go totally crazy with the color choices here. So her outfit is all in shades of blue, and I picked those colors purposely to match the background of my card. The pops of color are going to come into play with the red of the top of the toadstool, red of the ladybugs, the kind of peachy pink red of the other fairy's dress, and then the yellows or the yellow reds that we use throughout for dandelions and toadstools. So just kind of my thinking here was to implement some colors already in the background for at least one of the outfits on the fairies. I did some pink, kind of peachy pinks around the flowers on her headband. We're adding some really pretty greens, dark greens for the leaves and stems. Those yellow reds I used for her hair, again for my dandelions. This is one of my favorite yellow combinations. If you don't want a super bright yellow, I always think they are yellow reds. They are YR colors, so they're a yellow red. And you get that red undertone to them, even though they very much are a yellow. And what I love about that is I think they're a little bit deeper in color and not that bright, just bright yellow color, which is something I really like. Toadstools are all in shades, the top is the red. This is some of that red I was talking about, pulling in a little bit of color. For whatever reason, my favorite color for toadstool images is always red and yellow. Over the years and over many years, there have been toadstool images like this that I have stamped and colored from different manufacturers. And this is always a color combination I'm drawn to for whatever reason. I really like it. So we are using those same yellow reds that we used for hair, used for dandelions. We're using those for the base and underneath and the spots on our toadstool. Greens around the base with the grass. Probably using a little bit more of YR24 than we've used at anywhere else on the card to darken up some spots. And then we just need to add color to the dandelions. Even the dandelions that look like they're missing most of their leaves already. And then this large dandelion or flower, it could be any kind of flower really, I mean several different kinds, depending on how you color it. But I love it because I think it really works well if you want to position a fairy on the flower. So the sleeping fairy I'm putting on this flower. The sitting fairy could also fit on this really well. It's just kind of whatever you want to do. So again, same color combination. I did pull in some browns for the center of the flower, almost more sunflowery looking as I'm looking at it now. I just kind of went with whatever direction I felt at that moment. So let's color in our other fairy before we color in the rest of our dandelions, add some color to our ladybugs, and then die cut everything. What I love about the December kit, there are dies for everything. So all of the amazing images you can very easily die cut. You do not have to fussy cut. A lot of these are extremely detailed. I am not much of a fussy cutter, so that makes me super happy to have the dies to cut this out. And then even though it gives a completely different look, the colors I'm using for this fairy's dress are kind of in the same color family as the reds I used. I just used the reds on the darker end of the spectrum. This is going to be our 30, 32, and 35 for her dress, but our 35 was used as the lightest color on the toadstool. So it all coordinates and complements one another nicely, and that's going to come into play on the final card I share here today. I'm going to use both color combinations on her dress, and you'll see how well they work together. Now here is our background, and we are going to place this in our MISTI, position our sentiment. I am using the Sending Happy Fairy Wishes Your Way greeting, inking it up with a clear embossing ink, and then heat embossing with the Hero Arts white fine detail embossing powder. You could use another color if you wanted to. I think silver might be kind of pretty here too, maybe even gold. I went ahead and used white, as I mentioned earlier in the video. This is a great opportunity to tie in the white from the stars and moon in the sky. This panel does fit the entire front of a side fold card base, so it's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I've got all my die cut pieces plus a few additional ones. You can see some that have not been colored. I stamped and die cut them. I actually had a small accident happen when die cutting my images for this card. A die shifted and I did not realize it, and I ended up having to recolor the toadstool and leaves, and I think that's it for this card. I actually had 2 accidents with the cards in this video. I don't know what happened. That hardly ever happens. I tape my dies to my paper with Post-it tape or washi tape, so that doesn't happen. But for whatever reason, I didn't get it taped down good, and so I had this happen a couple times throughout, which was so frustrating. But I went ahead and re-stamped and colored because these images are just too cute not to. I am building my scene. The toadstool and fairy in the middle, kind of height-wise. I want to talk a little bit about design real quick. I went with that in the middle and then kind of gradually bringing it down. Yes, there are elements higher throughout. Some of the dandelions are about the same height on each side, but if you look at the rest of the design, it kind of comes down. So it kind of does a peak there in the center of the card and comes down, and then there's going to be a ladybug up in the upper right or sticking up a little bit higher. Design-wise, this just gives a really nice balance to the card, and even though it's a little extra work, adding multiple dandelions and leaves and things throughout the design, and having some higher and some lower and some appearing to kind of come up there from the bottom of the scene really helps give a much more complete scene of our scene and really finishes it off nice. Not only that, making sure that some of the images hang off the sides as well as the bottom helps ground everything really nicely so that it looks like a little piece of a bigger scene. This almost could continue on out both sides, maybe additional fairies and more flowers, more toadstools, things like that. When I'm designing a card like this, I'm always thinking about it in terms of what does the whole scene look like and what's this little piece that I want to tell the story. And in this case, it's obviously these 2 little fairies in this dandelion garden. But that's kind of how I went about designing and adhering all the pieces. In addition to that, some of the images are adhered directly to the background and some are adhered with foam adhesive, including my fairy, the toadstool, and some of the flowers. However, the fairy sleeping on the larger dandelion or the larger flower there on the right, she's adhered directly to the card base. This gives that illusion of depth. So we've got depth and dimension and then this overall scene and a little piece of it showing here. We're going to fill in the background with white Blizzard Nouveau crystal drops on the moon and some of the stars to give them sparkle, white Blizzard Nouveau crystal drops on the fairies' wings, the ladybug's wings, to give them a nice iridescent sparkle. The center of some of the dandelions, I even added Nouveau crystal drops as well. And then glossy accents on the ladybug's shells and also the spots on the toadstool. Before we take a white pen and add some highlights throughout the design on the images just to give them, again, little highlights here and there. I went pretty sparingly on these, more on the flowers probably, or the large flower, than anywhere else in the leaves, but just little highlights here and there. Little spots on the center of the part of the center of the large flower that you can see. And then this whole panel is going to be taken and adhered to a white side fold card base. If you wanted this to have maybe a little bit more of a framed up look, you could trim this down and maybe leave just a 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. So trim it to 4 inches by 5 1/4. And that's going to leave you with a nice little white border and frame it up if you don't want your scene to go from side to side. Another idea is you could narrow up your card a little bit, and instead of having it go all the way to the top, you could still have it 5 1/2 inches wide, so going from side to side, but have a little bit of white space at the top and a little bit of white space at the bottom, or maybe just a lot more white space up at the top and none at the bottom. Those are just some different ideas to maybe give you a little more white space if you don't want your scene to be the entire front of your card. So here, just adding in those last couple of leaves, I really felt that that right side needed a little bit more. So that's one of those times where I go back after I've already done my stamping and my coloring, my die cutting, adhering, and I say, what else does this card need? And in this case, leaves were the perfect thing to fill in. We've got a couple on the left, we've got a couple in the front, even partially covering the toadstool and things. And then we've got these two great ones kind of coming back out from behind, giving that illusion of more flowers in the background. Here is a look at the finished card, and we will move on to the next design featuring this My Monthly Hero December 2018 card kit. I knew the minute I opened up the kit that the mouse from the main kit was going to have to be the star of one of my cards. First of all, the size and scale is amazing. It's not too teeny tiny. It's super, super cute. I think the design of him is fantastic. And again, I'm a sucker for those toadstools, so I went ahead and used that here. Now, I used less of the stamped images for this card, but you could do something really similar to the last one and fill it in and give it more of that dandelion kind of or fairy garden type of look if you wanted to. But the background on this one is a lot more busy than the first card share, and so I felt like kind of keeping the images more to a minimum would work a little bit better. This time we're using Candied Apple, Spiced Marmalade, Mustard Seed, Mowed Lawn, Salty Ocean, and Wilted Violet on that same Starlight Star Bright bold prints background to give it a rainbow effect. And then the other two corners, like the rest of the quote-unquote sky, is faded jeans. Again, using a mini mister to mist this, kind of activate the ink a little bit, and then pressing that into my background. I used watercolor cardstock this time. I used smooth white cardstock the first time. Wasn't very forgiving, and I felt like I really had to work a lot. I felt like I tried the watercolor cardstock because it's made to work with water, for one thing. and I thought it might react with the inks a little bit better. I still had to, I did it a couple times to try to get the result I wanted. I thought it was really important to leave that in the video because when doing something like this is not just straight up stamping. This was kind of playing with inks and seeing what results I could get. I had to do it a couple times to get a background that I really loved. I also felt like it worked better starting with a bigger piece of cardstock than what I actually needed. I tried starting with a smaller strip of cardstock because this design, I am trimming it down, as I mentioned just a little bit ago with the first card, how you can kind of create a smaller scene. We're going to do that, but vertically instead of horizontally this time. And it worked a lot better to create the smaller scene by starting big and then just kind of trimming it down. Also, don't forget your heat tool is really your best friend with this technique because you want to be able to dry the background so that adding all that extra water doesn't result in the inks running into the star patterns or the moon. A little bit of that is okay, but a lot of it really kind of just ruins the overall look of the background. So you can see here I've got another sentiment from the main kit. I've got the mouse, the toadstool, and some dandelions. And I'm laying them out just to see kind of what I like, what works. We're going to again stamp our sentiment up towards the top with a clear embossing ink. I originally did sprinkle on white embossing powder. This is another kind of thing that I found out that I thought was important to leave in because I wanted to show how it did not work. I think it's super hard to read. You cannot see it with that beautiful rainbow in the background. So what I ended up doing is stamping it again right on top. I had not removed my stamp from the Misty, so I was able to stamp it exactly where it was. And I, this time, embossed with gold embossing powder. To tie the design together really nicely, I'm going to use some of the gold shimmer cardstock included in the December My Monthly Hero kit to mat my rainbow Starlight Starbright background on. And then attach this to a white top fold card base. That's going to give a beautiful little gold border along both sides of the background. We'll attach this to our white top fold card base. And then take Nuvo Crystal Drops in White Blizzard, and much like the first card, we're going to go over the moon and some of the stars and add this product. It's going to give a fantastic sparkly finish when dry that's just iridescent and adds that magical feel to the design. Once we have that, we are going to be ready to stamp our images that we're going to use to complete the scene. In this case, again, we're using the mouse, the toadstool, and some of the smaller dandelion images. I want it to look like he just blew on the dandelion and they are floating out there. I think that this image is darling and really works well for this. So I'm using some warm grays, some reds, the yellows. I really worked to get the mouse coloring kind of the way I wanted it to look. So I built up intensity with additional warm gray markers. You could use whatever colors you wanted to. With so much color in the background for this card, with that rainbow that we've created with the Distress Oxide inks, I felt like a nice neutral would kind of help bring it all together, especially when the toadstool is going to have reds and yellows. I thought a neutral would really work well here. I left the coloring in for you guys just to see the process. I know a lot of you love the coloring, so feel free to fast forward if that is not your thing. Also, don't forget you can use whatever color medium you love. I used Copic markers today. I would love to see all of these images colored with things like Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, colored pencils, whether it's Prismacolor or polychromos, watercolors. I think watercolors would absolutely give a fantastic dreamy effect to these images. Really, really fun. So I went ahead and put my card together, and I'm just going to share quickly the coloring of my final fairy. I had mentioned earlier where I used the light and dark colors from the spectrum for her outfit, and that's what I'm going to share here. Again, background created very, very similarly to the first background. You can see it there over to the left side of the screen. I did not recreate that on camera to save some time. However, it is adhered to a card base. It was trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4. That's going to leave you with that white border all the way around. The idea I talked about earlier, except this time we are even going to show a smaller snippet with a circle frame. So I used a Hero Arts Infinity Circle die to die cut a frame. I stamped a sentiment from one of the add-ons for this month, the Wish I May Stampin' Cut. So mix and match with the add-ons for December because they are fantastic, you guys. So excited about these. I stamped that with black ink on the frame. I popped the frame up with foam adhesive so it gives you a little bit more of that dimension. And then we are going to use a single fairy for this design. So whether you're doing a ton of images or just a few, I just wanted to show how awesome that Starlight Starbright background is and how well it works with the images from the main kit. So this is the image that my die moved, and I totally didn't die cut my fairy correctly, and I was so upset. So I went ahead and recolored her, and I will go ahead and finish putting the card together here in just a second. So here is a look at all 3 cards finished with the Starlight Star Bright Bold Prints background and images from the December 2018 My Monthly Hero main kit stamp set. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Hero Arts stamps and dies that you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll catch you next time.